Metal Gear Solid 2 is regarded as not only the greatest PS2 game ever made, but arguably the best video game ever created, period. It stood as Hideo Kojima's masterclass of video game storytelling and is a timeless classic that still has people playing it for the first time 24 years later. Now, I was born 6 years after Metal Gear Solid 2 came out, but the people who were around during that time have all said that the hype around this game was off the charts. Think of like Call of Duty type levels when it was actually good. From the trailers, the magazines, it was undoubtedly the game that everybody saw. And to say that Konami delivered a masterpiece would be an understatement. Its complex story and themes that are still being debated today is hands down the most gripping things that I've ever experienced in gaming. I mean, I'll admit it, I loved it so much that I ended up writing an entire Reddit post right after I beat the game. And not only its story, but its take on the stealth genre that was both challenging and required some level of skill, which ultimately defined the entire genre itself, and in my opinion beats all of these other games that try to use it. Now, it's important to note that I did play Metal Gear Solid 1 a while back, and from what I remembered, I liked the story, I liked Solid Snake, but for whatever reason, I just wasn't really into playing Metal Gear Solid 2, which was a massive mistake on my part. I do know this game did have a very complicated relationship with the fanbase when it first released, which we will get into, but in this, we're going to be diving into the story, characters, themes, the gameplay, and the world of Metal Gear Solid 2, and analyzing why I, from the perspective of someone who didn't grow up during this time, and so many other people think this truly is the greatest PS2 game of all time. Snake, what should I talk about first?
Maybe start with my legendary tanker incident.
Alright then. Now, as a sequel, Metal Gear Solid 2 pretty much excels in all aspects, but for me, the story is the biggest standout. It's by far the most interesting narratives that I've ever experienced. It's not one of those plots like The Last of Us that seems simple on the surface. It is what people would call the ultimate Hideo Kojima experience, where the writing is so complex with some confusing ass lore, but tackles some really deep messages like highly advanced tech like AI and manipulating people into believing things. The story of MGS2 ultimately boils down to you stopping a terrorist group from launching Metal Gear, but things constantly keep getting in the way, preventing you from reaching that goal. And if I had to say, I know it sounds corny, it's not really about the destination, but more so the journey that it takes to get there, because along your way, you're understanding and getting more and more attached to all of these characters, whether they're villains or not. I'm not going to go through every single thing about the story because I am in no way a Metal Gear Solid 2 expert, but more so the things that I loved and stood out to me personally. So the story picks back up 2 years later after the Shadow Moses incident from Metal Gear Solid 1, where Solid Snake isn't a soldier for Foxhound anymore, but now working with his weird ass friend Otacon in a non-profit organization called the Philanthropy, as they're set out to infiltrate a new type of Metal Gear that was on track to transport right through New York City. And I've gotta say, and I'll touch more on this later, but the cinematography of this game is unreal. This opening segment of Solid Snake walking down the bridge and jumping onto the ship is by far my favorite opening to any game I've played. After boarding the tanker, it's immediately overtaken by Russian mercenaries led by Colonel Gulukovich, his daughter Ogla, and Ocelot. Snake and Otacon's main goal is to sneak into the tanker, take photographs of the new Metal Gear Ray, put it online, and expose this thing that the Marines built. When Snake gets to the cabin, he sees that all of the crew members are dead and sees more Marine helicopters approaching the tanker. Once outside, he sees a Russian troop who is in fact Ogla, where she's talking to her father. He says how they're gonna scuttle the tanker until they find what they're looking for, but by this time it's pretty obvious why they're all there, and that's to rob Metal Gear Ray. Her and her dad kind of argue because she's like, Dad, I want to stay and fight, but he's like, motherfucker, you're pregnant. And it's like, why the fuck is a pregnant lady going on a mission like this? But before they find Metal Gear Ray, Snake ends up confronting Ogla, where she ends up throwing a trick knife at him that ends up leading into a boss battle. After taking her down, Otacon then tells Snake that they didn't just dig up this new info about this new Metal Gear that the Marines built, but that he got an anonymous tip from his younger stepsister, EE, or Emma Emmerich, which it It's like, I mean, just what a great time to tell me this. It's also in the same scene where Snake sees a Cypher spying on him and taking photographs of his every move, which he assumes is potentially the US Army behind it, but isn't so sure about it, which becomes pretty significant a few minutes later because it pretty much foreshadows everything. But after a bit of a challenging shootout with more Marine Corps and more stealth segments, Snake reaches the central housing chambers where the Marines are held at before finally reaching the new Metal Gear Ray, where we finally get our first glimpse of the new prototype. I'll be completely honest, and I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but I feel like the parts where they talk about like political stuff and the US government kinda just went over my head. I don't know if it's just like an age thing, but I was just having a really hard time trying to wrap my head around that part when they were talking about it. But as planned, we take some photographs of Metal Gear Ray, upload them after sending Otacon females in bikinis, and after the commander finishes his speech is when everything goes down. Ocelot appears out of nowhere, telling the commander, aka Scott, that he's simply just taking Metal Gear Ray back. Then all of a sudden his boys show up. Well, they're technically not his boys, it's Gerlukovich's because they both, work together. But Ocelot then openly just tells everyone that he's taking Metal Gear Ray back, but he's returning it to a completely different organization that he works for, that being the Patriots, aka the Lalelu. Who came up with that name? But this makes sense because Ocelot was truly never working for the Russians. He was just using them so he could get to this point to then turn on them. He ends up shooting the commander and killing Gerlukovich all at the same time in a very sick cinematic scene. We then witness the ghost of Liquid Snake from Metal Gear Solid 1 taking over Ocelot's right arm, which I've always thought was super cool. From here, the tanker starts sinking because Ocelot had planted multiple explosives beforehand without anyone knowing. And with it sinking and everyone trying to scramble to escape, give some time to hijack and steal Metal Gear Ray. After Metal Gear Ray is being taken away, it's pretty obvious that Ocelot was the one who was spying on Solid Snake on that cipher earlier, and the reason why this is pretty important is because now he's able to use this as photographic evidence that Snake was the one that sank the tanker, as one of the photos that he captured was literally him standing over a pregnant lady that looks dead. But this as the opening section of the game is phenomenal. It sets everything up so perfectly, from Ocelot's shocking betrayal to him framing Snake, creates a lot of mystery and curiosity for what's to come next in the game. Not to mention the pacing of this segment is amazing. It's going from here to here to here. There's no slow bits. Every single scene matters, as well as ending on a massive cliff note. And I'm not sure if anyone else was really expected for what Konami was going to do next in the game. So we fast forward 2 years later, where it's immediately stated that Solid Snake died on the tanker when Metal Gear Ray was stolen by Ocelot, meaning that we won't be playing as Snake anymore, but instead a brand new character of the series, Jack, aka Jack the Ripper, aka Mr. Lightning Bolt, aka Raiden. Now, this was one of the more controversial things when the game came out. Fans were upset that they weren't playing as legendary Solid Snake anymore and felt like Konami trolled them so hard, which is completely valid because, I mean, most of the marketing of this game was just Solid Snake. And I can heavily relate to this because I've played games like The Last of Us Part 2, where you're playing as a completely different character that seems to come out of left field. But I'll be honest, I actually don't hate this switch up. In fact, I think it's amazing and has some really good benefits for the story and characters that some fans just don't see, because in their mind, it's just, fuck this femboy ass Raiden kid, I want Solid Snake. But mainly for the fact that we are now seeing a different perspective. We're not playing as an elite badass soldier anymore. We're now in the shoes of someone who's slightly more amateur and slightly less cool. And he does start growing on you more and more throughout the story because his past and motivators are beginning to get revealed now. Anyways, Raiden is sent out to infiltrate the Big Shell, which is this giant, hideous offshore facility seized by a terrorist group called the Sons of Liberty, with his main tasks being to save the president and hostages from that terrorist group, with all this being directed by the Colonel, presumably Colonel Campbell from Metal Gear Solid 1. It's also here where he finds out that his girlfriend Rose is on the mission as well, which at first doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because this becomes such a massive theme throughout the rest of the story. Raiden will be in these high-level stressful situations, and Rose will be like,
Jack, do you remember the day we met?
I'm kind of busy right now, Rose.
You're right, sorry. Jack, do you remember what day tomorrow is?
That again. I'm sorry, but I still don't have a clue.
But I won't harp on that too much because I want to save that for when I talk about some of the characters at the end of the story. I will admit, the big shell section at first dramatically slows the pacing of the story down, which as it should be because this is now the main chunk of the plot, and things need to develop here. But it is interesting though to look at how the Colonel talks about Solid Snake here. Raiden thinks of him as a legend, basically a fanboy, but the Colonel and Rose play into the propaganda by believing that he's a bad guy and he was the one that sank the tanker and killed all those people due to Ocelot framing him. They also point out that he's 100% dead and that his body was recovered in the wreck, but that completely gets contradicted like 10 minutes later because as Raiden makes his way through one of the struts, he sees this weird looking feller called Vamp, one of the main villains of the game, killing, or I guess eating, one of the SEAL team members. That's a real bad day for that guy. But as Vamp spots Raiden, this guy comes out of nowhere to save the day. Whoa, why did he kind of look like Solid Snake?
Get down!
Oh, he didn't die. When Raiden sees him, he doesn't exactly know who he is at first and thinks he's an enemy, but Snake's like, well, relax, man, I'm not a SEAL team member. He then asks him who he is, to which he says that he's Lieutenant Pliskin, obviously trying to hide his identity while he's also trying to infiltrate the big shell. Now, the other reason why I love playing as Raiden is not only because I think it's interesting, but because Solid Snake as a character in this game feels so much more legendary, which stems from we just don't see him as often anymore. So the moments that he does come on screen, it's a pretty big deal. Not to mention he's wearing the freaking suit from Metal Gear Solid 1. I mean, pack it up, man. This guy is too cool. Raiden, what the fuck are you wearing? I also just feel like in the first game, Snake feels more of like a celebrity, less than an actual human being, because it felt like in almost every single codec call, it was bombarded with people saying how legendary we were. So he's just so much more mellow, mysterious, cooler in my opinion, and this type of character development perfectly clashes with Raiden, because throughout the story, they almost develop this older, younger brother vibe, where Snake's educating Raiden on these things that he doesn't have much insight on, like his VR training that he kept bringing up, where Snake tells him, look kid, VR training is cool and all, but that shit is not going to prepare you for what real war is like. And of course, Raiden's like, oh, I had no idea. And I just love this dynamic of this just elite soldier from Foxhound working with a rookie. For pretty much the rest of the story, Raiden, Snake, and Peter Stillman, the bomb disposal guy, go around the big shell defusing bombs that Fat Man planted, who's a member of Dead Cell, another highly specialized terrorist group. Stillman ends up getting killed in one of the struts because an explosive went off after we defused all of the baby ones, meaning that I guess we killed him. Raiden ends up defeating Fat Man in a bitch of a boss fight. We defused the last one that was right underneath him, and as Raiden is leaving the helipad, this mysterious ninja looking feller that almost looks like Gray Fox from Metal Gear Solid 1 shows up, who Raiden doesn't know, but it's pretty obvious that it's Ogla because we can literally see her right through the helmet. But she tells him that the big shell is in fact housing a brand new type of Metal Gear, which I was a little confused at first because I was like, didn't we already see the new Metal Gear in the tanker section? Well, no, because that one was just a prototype. From here, Snake and Raiden arrange a transport for the hostages on a helicopter that Otacon is flying when Liquid Snake appears out of nowhere to stop us. When we finally come to rescue the president, he firstly grabs Raiden's dick.
I'm prepared to face the consequences of my betrayal.
What are you... What the...
You're a man?
And when this first happened, I actually didn't think too much of it. I just thought that he was just being a little weird. But people say that he did this because he thought that Raiden was Ogla coming to kill him since she works for the Russians. But even if that's true, why is he groping people? That doesn't explain that part. I really just think these kinds of moments are just weird Japanese humor because in Metal Gear Solid 1, there were so many moments where the camera would just zoom in on girls' butts and Snake would say stuff like,
Yeah, you've got a great butt.
Oh, I see. First it's my eyes, now it's my butt. What's next?
But anyways, President Johnson tells Raiden that Solidus was actually the former president before he was kicked out of the office due to him trying to issue Shadow Moses to build Metal Gear, to which the Patriots were like, nah man, you're out, which led to him becoming president. He also says that the new Metal Gear that the big show was housing was called Arsenal Gear, which to put it short is basically like the atomic bomb version of Metal Gear Ray, miles more destructive, and it's actually going to launch pretty damn soon. He then kills himself, which I know I keep saying, but becomes pretty important later at the end of the story, because you'll see how everything that's happened so far all comes together. By this point, all three of them, Raiden, Snake, and Otacon, are now working together. Otacon tells Raiden that his stepsister EE was actually on the big shell, and he needed to find her because apparently she's the only person that can upload a virus that will stop Arsenal Gear from launching. Raiden saves her, but she's unable to walk on her own at the moment, so we have to hold her hand, and what do you know, Rose gets all jealous and says this.
Well, Jack, it sounds like you and Miss Emma are getting along just fine.
Rose?
I've been monitoring your every move and conversation. I can't say it's been fun.
Give me a break. I'm only trying to keep her spirits up.
We end up sending Emma across the bridge, but then out of nowhere, Vamp makes his return again and stabs her right before he gets shot by Raiden. Not gonna lie, at first I thought Raiden was the one that shot her, because I was really gonna be like, man, you really fucked up here. And I gotta say, I don't usually get super emotional with storytelling in any kind of medium, unless it really hits the spot for me, and here, it completely knocks it out of the park. This entire sequence is when I knew that I was experiencing potentially the best narrative in gaming. This whole part where Snake picks up her body and Otacon sees a stepsister for the first time in like 10 years, and they're trying to upload the virus, but it stops at 90% because she's dying, and they realize that they're all screwed because now they can't stop Arsenal Gear from launching, and Otacon gets all sad. Like, this is good stuff.
I had a relationship with your mother. She seduced me.
What? I swear, I had to do a double take when he said this, because this entire part is all sad with the music, and then he just says this. I mean, I get it, it's not his biological mom, but why is he banging his stepsister's mother? That's just such a weird family dynamic. But ultimately, my favorite part of the entire game period is when Snake tells Otacon that he has to rescue all the hostages since the virus isn't of any use anymore, and I'm just gonna let this entire thing play out.
You've got your job, we've got ours.
You mean I'd only get in your way?
Wrong. Only you can save those hostages. Got it?
Right. Listen, the two of you won't be able to destroy that thing. Eliminate the enemy. That's your only option.
Like, this whole part gave me chills the first time around. All of them walking as a unit for the first time in slow motion, to the shot of them leaving with Otacon's sister laying dead on the ground, as this will be the last time they see her since the big shell is gonna start sinking soon. Like, this is a 10 out of 10 moment for me, along with Snake and Otacon's handshake scene.
Leave it to me.
I repeat, personnel in the upper levels, head for the evacuation area immediately.
I'm counting on you, Otacon.
Again, it's just beautiful. This whole part just cements Snake and Otacon's friendship since they've been through a lot with each other. I don't even think you need to play MGS1 for this moment to hit hard. Of course, it's gonna help if you do, but these parts are just so good on their own. I think it's kind of funny though how Raiden is just sitting there in the back third wheeling as Snake and Otacon are having their own little moment together. Now, from here to the very end of the game is when things start getting very weird, because by this point of the story is when everything starts all coming together. Raiden finds out that the colonel that he's been talking to the entire time is actually just an AI robot, and Rose at some point is revealed to also be AI.
Don't you know that our plans have your interests, not ours, in mind?
What?
Jack, listen carefully, like a good boy.
And by the time Arsenal Gear launches and Otacon escapes off it with all the hostages, Asla drops a bomb on everyone as we're standing on Arsenal Gear, saying all this crazy stuff like how everything is just a simulation and everyone was just played and we just didn't realize it. And then he ends up doing that thing where the spirit of Liquid Snake takes over his body, which leads to Arsenal Gear crashing right in the middle of New York City, and Raiden ends up fighting Solidus, his godfather, with a katana, which is just such an epic final boss fight. But when we beat him, we see Snake again, which then it's like, where the fuck did he come from? And where did all these people come from? But that's besides the point. He tells Raiden not to believe everything he hears, and then kind of just walks away, to which we see Rose in person for the first time, which just confused the hell out of me for reasons I'll explain in a second.
they taught me some good things, too.
I know. We've inherited freedom from all those who fought for it. We all have the freedom to spread the word. Even me.
You see, I've played a lot of great story games like Red Dead Redemption 2, The Last of Us, God of War, but man, this story is just in a league of its own. And the crazy thing is, it's not even that long. This game only took me 3 days to beat, yet I would still need to do a 5 or 6 hour video just on the story alone to do it justice. The themes and plot twists, especially in the last 2 hours, mindfucks you so hard and makes you question every single thing that happens. You start wondering if any of this is real, and has anything that we've even done even mattered. It's crazy. 24 years later, this story is still being discussed on whether if this is what Kojima actually meant or if this is what actually happened. It kind of sucks though to think that people genuinely hated this game, because when you think about it, Kojima poured everything he had into this by conveying a strong message narratively that he was extremely passionate about, yet almost everyone just completely missed it and we're just only wondering why weren't they playing as Solid Snake anymore. But I guess that's the price that you pay for taking such a risk like this, I guess. The characters of Metal Gear Solid 2 can be talked about forever. I'll admit, I was quite surprised to see just how much depth everyone has and how much all of them play a massive role in the story. Because with a lot of the games that I've played at least, there's at least like 3 or 4 characters that are pretty underdeveloped and quite frankly forgettable, but not with this game. Looking at Raiden, I still don't quite understand how people still hate him. Like, look, at first he did just come across as just a giant pussy. He constantly needs things explained to him by the Colonel, whereas Snake just knows what he's doing because he's just that guy. And the times Raiden tries to be intimidating is just comical, and not a single person takes him seriously, even his own girlfriend. He even tries to copy Snake at one point when he confronts Ogla, where he just repeats the exact same line as him. It's like, son, you're not Solid Snake, you fucking poser. But as you go along his journey, he starts to get more and more fleshed out, and his background gets revealed, where it turns out that he's not just some little nobody. He fought in a war when he was just a child, after having been adopted by Solidus Snake, who had been running a child soldier unit when he was still the president of the United States, which is why he was ultimately picked to infiltrate the Big Shell. And in my opinion, it's so cool to see this rookie that's been manipulated by these two people start to slowly connect the dots about all of the weird stuff that's going around him. Like the entire situation where he finds out that the Colonel is just an AI, and that the entire mission that he's on is just a simulation from Shadow Moses from Metal Gear Solid 1. It's just that he doesn't find out till it's too late.
I think that's enough talk. It's time for the final exercise. Raiden, take Solidus down.
Think again. I'm through doing what I'm told.
It's also interesting because when it's revealed that the Colonel is AI, you kind of end up looking back and realize that it was pretty obvious all along, because compared to the MGS1 Colonel Campbell, this one has no type of emotion. Every single interaction with this guy is just him giving us directions, and anytime Raiden questions something, he's immediately shut down by him. And going back to Rose, I feel like a lot of people, including myself, all found her to be that annoying girlfriend that always wanted to talk to Raiden while he was on these dangerous missions, and at first it doesn't even really make sense why she's even there in the first place, which I can for sure assume is what Kojima wanted players to feel. My original part for this video was going to be me talking about how the romance of this game sucks and makes no sense, but after having beaten the game and looking more into it, it has significantly changed a little, because the real reason why she's there is because she was assigned by the Patriots to provide him information, and then at some point she ends up getting replaced with AI. This is why I was confused at the end of the game, because when she started sounding all weird and robotic on the codec call, I was like, wait, so was Rose even real? Has our relationship with her just been fake? But then at the end we see her in person, and then I was like, okay, what the fuck is going on? I know I also kind of already touched on Raiden and Snake's chemistry together, but I just want to highlight on this even more because these two undoubtedly go down as one of the best duos in gaming history. Because despite them being two completely different people, It's so awesome to see Snake being a mentor and supporting Raiden through all of these revelations he's going through, as he's starting to realize how everything he believed is a lie now. And he doesn't flack him for it because he knows what it's like. He just tells him not to believe everything that he hears now. Like, sure, Konami could have made him the main protagonist, which fans would obviously love, but taking this ballsy risk by making him a supporting character now, that even David Hayter, the voice actor, was surprised by, benefits Snake's character heavily for future titles.
Find something to believe in, and find it for yourself. And when you do, pass it on to the future.
Believe in what?
That's your problem. Come on.
So I think it's now a good time to talk a little bit about the gameplay of Metal Gear Solid 2. And straight off the bat, I'd say it's more of the same from Solid 1, which is not a bad thing in my books. Now, to be clear, I played this on my PS2, so I'm not too familiar with all the new changes made for the Master Collection on the PS5, besides the graphics being upscaled. Though in my opinion, I feel like the PS2 graphics have held up pretty damn well. But the core gameplay of MGS1 essentially boils down to stealthing past enemies, traversing around the big shell, doing certain activities like defusing bombs and engaging in boss fights. And I've gotta say, and this isn't a bad thing about the game in any way, this is probably just my incompetence showing, but in terms of the level designs, if I was a 10-year-old kid in 2001 playing this for the first time, dude, there's no way in hell that I would be able to beat this game. The way the levels are designed just confused the hell out of me, and I had to use a guide for some of them. Especially for when I got to the big shell and had to defuse all those bombs Fat Man planted. I was having such a hard time trying to navigate my way around it, and I kept forgetting which strut that I had to go to, and honestly it just made me hate the big shell. But on a positive note, the boss fights in this game are a massive step up from MGS1 in my opinion. The ones like the Harrier fight, where Raiden and Snake are trying to take down Solid, is one of the best. It is a very long boss battle, which can be slightly jarring for some people because you're just wondering when will this end, but being able to use the Stinger and trying to blow up the Harrier is so fun. I will say, stealth in this game makes modern stealth look like crap. Not only is the detail super good, like how when an enemy spots you and radios in, but right as they say enemy spotted and you shoot them with your tranquilizer, the person on the other end will get super suspicious and will send a backup unit to investigate it. I love how even though that this is a stealth game, there's never any moments where it forces you to use it. You can just go guns blazing, which isn't the smartest thing to do, because if you do that, you're not just alerting enemies in that entire section, but you are alerting every single person in the big shell. But it's there if you want to do it. And if you want to play how the game is intended to, it's really neat how you can approach the stealth, because you can go behind enemies, draw your gun, and either Snake or Raiden, depending on who you're playing as, will yell,
"Freeze!"
Now, my only negative for the gameplay has to do with the shooting. Not the shooting mechanics itself, but the times when third person would be very helpful. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the top-down view is bad. I in fact think that's what makes these games so cool. But when it comes down to trying to take on a horde of enemies, I have to keep switching to first person, and I can't move when I'm aiming, and it just makes everything so unintuitive. And I actually take that back about the mechanics not being a problem. There is one specific gun in particular that I hate with a passion. The sniper rifle that Raiden gets before the Harrier boss fight sucks fucking ass. Like, why does it keep moving when I'm trying to aim? This was so infuriating when I had to protect Emma while she was crossing the bridge, because I kept shooting her on accident due to me just trying to shoot the explosive that she was walking towards, but the reticle would just keep shaking and I was trying to fix it and it just fricked everything up. Anyways, one other thing that I've heard people always say is that Metal Gear Solid 2 is barely even a game due to the long-winded cutscenes, similar to other story-driven games where there's not much interactivity like The Last of Us. And while I personally don't mind it and quite frankly wouldn't change it, since it needs to be like that due to the story that's being told, I can 100% see why this would turn some people off. Because at the end of the day, it's a video game, and if we're going like 30 minutes just watching cutscenes, yeah, you can make the argument that it might as well just be a movie. And honestly, I don't think I can even really argue against this, because anything I say is just my preference. Because objectively, video games are about you playing it, not really you just sitting there watching for long periods of time. For example, the finale is borderline a movie. Like, don't get me wrong, it was an epic 10 out of 10 experience, but I was also in the back of my mind thinking, yo, when was the last time I actually picked up my controller? But you've just gotta embrace it, because it is ultimately a part of the game's charm. I also haven't even really touched on the cinematography of this game. I had to keep reminding myself that this is a PS2 game, because man, some of these scenes are just breathtaking, like when Raiden and Emma are climbing down the ladder with the sun in the background. I believe this is one of the very few games that taps into the cinematic style, from not just these stunning scenes, but with how the camera itself has that dynamic feel where it's moving around constantly during cutscenes. A lot of old games, especially PS2 era and under, would always just have the camera in one spot with all of the characters in frame. So for Metal Gear Solid 2 to have these literal movie type scenes just says how far it was ahead of everyone else. And like I said earlier, my favorite scene of the entire game is when Snake, Otacon, and Raiden are walking in slow motion, but some other scenes to note is the tanker incident. This entire cutscene is like 15 minutes long, yet every minute counts, and it never loses your interest like most other long-winded cutscenes in other games. As well, music is a massive supporter for when it comes to cinematography. And I know that I always say this for when I talk about music and video games, but I'm straight up here when I say that this soundtrack may be one of the best I've ever heard. Like, just the opening intro alone before you even start playing is just phenomenal. The music, the cinematics, it completely sets the stage emotionally for what players are about to experience. It's so good that every time I boot up MGS2, I always let this intro play out, which says a lot because besides this and the Grand Theft Auto games, I usually always just skip game intros. You also have scenes like the final one where Snake and Raiden are having their last conversation together, and the music in the background is the exact same one as the intro, but it's a trumpet version.
They taught me some good things too.
I know. We've inherited freedom from all those who fought for it. We all have the freedom to spread the word, even me.
Snake, what about Olga's child?
Don't worry, I'll find him. Count on it.
I really love when games do this, where they take the original track and strip it down, giving it a more somber, bittersweet feeling. It gives you that fulfillment feeling like this is the end of the game. And on the flip side to this, sometimes music isn't even needed for a scene to be cinematic. There's so many you can pull away from, like again, Raiden and Emma as they're staring at the sun. It's dead silent, with the only audio being able to be heard is the birds chirping in the ocean. But you get it, I can go on and on about it. But to conclude this, Metal Gear Solid 2 will undoubtedly go down as probably the greatest game I've ever played in my life, which at first I was really hesitant to say because that game right there, Red Dead Redemption 2, has always been my favorite. However, the themes and message that this game conveys is the deepest thing I've experienced. With the nature of this story being convoluted and downright confusing at times is what makes it so good. Because after you beat it, you're left with all of these questions like, wait, how did that happen? Or how does this make sense? Or what does that mean? And you go down this rabbit hole of trying to figure this stuff out with other people in the community. It's at least up there with my top 3 games of all time. The little complaints that I have are extremely subjective and do not in any way affect my experience with it. I do plan on covering the next Metal Gear Solid game and Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, because apparently all of the questions that I have for this game will be answered in these, so super excited because I cannot wait to find out where all of this leads to. But thank you all so much for watching to the end of this video. Thanks for the support you guys have been showing recently. The channel also recently reached 6,000 subscribers, which I didn't even realize until just a couple days ago, but I know my videos aren't like the greatest on YouTube, but I really do appreciate you guys for sticking around and supporting my content because it just gives me more motivation to keep on going. I'm not sure when this video is going out. It's either going to go out before Thanksgiving or after Thanksgiving, but whenever it comes out, I hope you guys enjoy yourselves and enjoy your time with your family. And I'll see you guys on my next video. See ya.